Hello everyone! Hi, this is Karima from Hijabi Globetrotter. The video is a little bit different, something I wanted to share with you. So far, it's been nearly 2 years since I've lived in New York City, and there are a couple of things that I wish I had known before moving here. Here are 12-ish things I wish I'd known and you should know before moving to New York City. New York City is one of those few places in the United States where you don't necessarily need a car. You'll survive perfectly well without a car. With that being said, you have to walk everywhere. And I know it's like, duh, of course you have to walk everywhere, but I really underestimated that. And some places seem near or close, but they're really far. Sometimes because there's just so many things to do and so many places to see, you can feel overwhelmed having to get there, having to do all these things. I had my sister visit me from the south, and she was telling me she wanted to do this and that and this and that. And I was like, look, it looks like it's so easy. You have to count in logistics, walking time, exhaustion, all of the above while visiting a place. So that is something it's not like I did not know this one, but I just took for granted, prior to moving to New York City. Speaking about being overwhelmed, prior to coming to New York, I was like, it's awesome that we have the public transportation, which is very convenient for people who don't have a car. But I just didn't understand how they suck. No diss here. I mean, it's cool that they have that, but it's kind of like, it's like 100 years old. I think it really is 100 years old. So there's a lot of like old metro, old systems, and it's never on time. So this is something that contributes to the overwhelmingness of New York City, because the logistics did not make sense. For example, if you live in Brooklyn and you want to go to Queens, you think it's a straight line. It should be a straight line, but most times you have to go through Manhattan and go back to Queens. It's like zigzag. So that is one of the things about New York that I didn't know and I wish I'd known. So if you plan to go somewhere in New York, say you are supposed to, in the perfect world, you're supposed to be there in 30 minutes. I'll just definitely add another 30 minutes, an hour, or an hour and a half to whatever your plan is. Basically, add an hour. Just add an hour. Add an hour to whatever time you really want to be in a particular place, especially if you're going to use a metro. So that is something I wish someone had told me about the metro. It's not super efficient. There's delays. There's a lot of factors that could contribute to the overwhelmingness of New York. And that is something I wish someone would have told me prior to moving here. You have to have good shoes. I definitely underestimated that. From all the places I've grown up in, the Midwest and the South, we don't necessarily invest in shoes as the big city. And that is something I took for granted. I definitely had to get a good shoe while living in New York City. One of the stores I definitely recommend is Clark's. They're on the pricier side, but I will tell you that they're worth it. My parents had bought Clark's growing up and they've lasted for years, and I'm a personal testimony to tell you that the Clark's shoes are quality and they work in New York. Sometimes you'll see ladies with high heels walking to work, and there is a trick to this. While I was working with a company, I saw my coworkers have two sets of shoes. They had their nice heels on, which they'll walk towards, when they're close to the workplace. And when they're leaving, they'll put on their sneakers or Nike shoes. That is one of the tricks that New York ladies do here in the city. Prior to living in New York City, I didn't think that these were luxuries until I lived in New York City. One of them is having a washer and dryer in your apartment building or in your home. That is something I didn't know that New York lacked. All the other places I've grown up in, the Midwest, the South, even living in Spain, it was common to have a washer and dryer in your unit, but it is a luxury in New York City. It's like a steal. If you have a washer and dryer in your unit or your apartment, or even in your apartment building, it's a steal here. So yeah, that is a luxury I took for granted when I did not live in New York City. Another luxury is having an elevator. Having an elevator and a doorman can kind of signify luxury living in New York City. Other places, not so much, but in New York City, things are a little different here. Speaking of luxuries I took for granted, the biggest luxury I definitely took for granted before moving to New York is size and space. I mean, of course, people know that New York is a big city and things are tight, but I didn't know how small apartments could be in New York. You can have a 750 square foot apartment for, I don't know, $1,000 or and above, especially in Manhattan area. So it's not uncommon to have like a tiny shoe size apartment for a very exorbitant amount. Of course, that's kind of changed because of the pandemic. Now you have steals for New York City. For example, there was like I've seen like a 1-bedroom apartment for like $1,500 or even $1,300, which is a big steal in New York City. But you know, things are very expensive. Sizes of apartments are smaller, but there's a trick to that. If you go further out of Brooklyn or Queens, you can get bigger size apartments for more affordable prices. Everything closer to Manhattan or in Manhattan usually is expensive and smaller. New Yorkers have this mentality of go hard or go home with anything they do, and that is something I didn't realize. I mean, I guess the best of the best people kind of live here, like very ambitious people, and it's no joke. Whether it's singing or playing tennis or painting, if you're not bringing in your best, you're kind of pushed aside. One side is kind of like mean or sad. On the other hand, it kind of pushes you to be the best. So here you don't want to be mediocre in anything you do. If you want to do something, you do it to the best of your ability. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. So for many people, they prefer living in a remote area or quiet area. For me, I like living in big cities because I can find communities that are similar to my lifestyle, or, you know, Muslims like me. New York and New Jersey has a lot of Muslims, but having a lot of something doesn't always mean that it's quality something. And that is something I learned, probably a controversial topic, but, you know, doesn't mean because there are a lot of Muslims, you're going to find great people, great partners, doesn't mean that. That is something I learned moving to New York. A positive side of that is that because of the quantity, you get options. So for example, if you meet a group of people that are rude or not open-minded and whatever, you can find people that fit you and your lifestyle. I'll say the same thing goes as well for jobs, for food, for whatever. New York has a lot of everything, but having a lot of something doesn't mean that those things are quality. The only good thing about that, having a lot of that, is that you just have more options, but you still have a lot of filtering to do to find the right fit for you. That is the best way to put it. Food options is one of New York's greatest gifts to mankind. You would never get tired of eating here in New York. If you are a foodie, this is your place. There's just like so many types of food and invention. Actually, I guess the cronut actually came from New York. The idea came from Dominic Ansel. They're just different types of inventions that you can find in New York when it comes to food. New Yorkers are very proud of their pizza. Do not mess with New Yorkers and their pizza. You could get hit for that. But I do agree, New York pizza is delicious. So yeah. And also, if you stick to halal or zabiha diet, you don't have anything to worry about. Speaking of food, New York has its own specialty stores, not just in food, of course, but in many type of products. For example, when I think of books in the United States, I always think of Barnes & Nobles, but New York has its own, which is The Strand. I love this bookstore so much, and I hope to have my book published in the Strand one day, inshallah. So these are things that you should know when coming to New York. Don't just go to Olive Garden because you know Olive Garden. Don't just go to Papa John's because you know Papa John's. In fact, people will laugh at you if you have Papa John's pizza in New York City. Like, what are you doing with your life? If you I have questions for you. Don't do that. So if you're in New York, try the local stuff. We got a dollar pizza. We got Joe's Pizza. You have Arturo. You have Paulie G's. You got Patsy's Pizza. Different types of pizzerias that are just unique to New York. So definitely try that because, you know, when you're coming to a city, you want to try the hidden and local gems. So that is something to do. New York is also known for its bagels. Definitely try bagel places in New York. I'll put a link down below for good and cool bagel places in New York. So yeah, the moral of the story is don't stick to what you know. If you like exploring new things, definitely try the local stuff that New York has to offer. New Yorkers have their own way of saying things that I didn't realize. When you live in your own pocket of the United States, you think that your accent is the right accent. Like, for example, Midwesterners feel like their accent is the neutral accent. Southerners think that their accent is special. And of course, New Yorkers think that their accent is golden. And everyone doesn't think that they have an accent until you leave your own pocket of the United States. And that was the case for me. Going to New York, I was just like, whoa, people really speak differently here. And there are some words that you know, but New Yorkers pronounce very differently. Here are the words: dog, boss, call, ball, talk, walk, coffee, chocolates, office, all. I'm telling you, it's crazy. And sometimes I find myself saying that, especially coffee. I don't know why. I'm like, coffee? Coffee. Okay, now let's put that all together in a New York sentence. Hey! Hey Johnny! You want a cup of coffee? Or chocolates? Okay, you want coffee, okay? And you want hot dogs as well? I'm online right now. Hey! Don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. I tried. Have words like dead ass, mad, real talk, or some of these words you probably recognize them from rap and, you know, hip hop references. Guap, which means money. Bodega, which threw me off because as a Spanish speaker, I was thinking like, what are they talking about when they say bodega? And when my sister, she lived in New York before I did, she was like, oh, we're going to the bodega. And I was like, why are you going to the wine cellar? But bodega means grocery store, like a small convenience store. The city is referred to as Manhattan. Yous is like the y'all of the South, and the you guys of the Midwest is just meaning you all. What they say is brick. Especially when you're very cold, it's like, oh, it's brick cold out here. It means it's very cold out here. The one word that I just can't even try to use in my vocabulary because it just sounds grammatically wrong is saying online. Ooh, it's like I'm in line. I literally had that debate on my Instagram and people were like, no, it's online. And I was like, no, it's in line, you know. Yeah, that is a very New York thing to say. Speaking of New York, everyone always assumes that everything is in Manhattan, and it's not. Before I came to New York, I thought so too. I was just like, New York, Manhattan, but there's just more to New York than just Manhattan. Go check out Brooklyn, go check out Queens. Even Harlem, although it's still Manhattan, it still is different. Honestly, every borough has its own culture and its type of people, and it's very cool checking out each of these boroughs and learning more about the people there. New Yorkers are very unique and characteristic individuals that they're not ashamed of who they are, and it will be a pity for you to just explore Manhattan and think that you've done it all when there's just more to New York than Manhattan. In fact, just even exploring further out of New York City is even a greater option because, you know, people always have this stereotype that New York is just skyscrapers, no grass, no vegetation, no greenery, and that is not true. We have a thing called New York State. Hello, New York is pretty big. It's not just the city. The city is basically an island of a huge state. Upstate New York is a thing. It exists. There's the Hudson River. There's Catskills. There's Long Island. There's the Hamptons. They're just really nice places to visit beyond Manhattan, beyond New York City. So if you have time, explore these unique parts of New York. Last but not least, subway etiquette. This is something that many people don't know about New York. We know that the subway exists, but do you know the rules of the subway? One of which is don't stare at people. You know, we're in tight spaces. You're bound to be very close to people, but whatever you do, just don't stare at people. People will think that you want to square up with them, which means you want to fight with them. So don't even try that. If you see an empty car, don't go in there. There's a reason. Either something dangerous is happening, something creepy is happening, something disgusting is happening. So there's a reason, especially during rush hour and there's a lot of people, why people don't go into a car that looks empty. Yeah, there's a reason. So just don't go in there. Other etiquette to know is that I think this is common sense. If you see an older person, stand up for them. I've seen many times people not standing up for elderly or pregnant people. So that is something to keep in mind. Other subway things that you should know, and I wish someone had told me, is how hot it can be in the subway, especially during summer. So if you have low tolerance to heat, just know there's a sauna down there, and there's a lot of people usually in the subway. So that is something to keep in mind. My parents came visiting during the summer, and I felt really bad that we had to, just get around the city with an Uber because it was just unbearably hot, and you're going upstairs and downstairs and it's exhausting. So just keep in mind this information when coming to New York. All right, those are a couple of things I wish someone could have told me before moving to New York, but now I know, and now you know. So definitely, if you're watching this video and you go to New York, you're gonna be wiser than I was when I first moved to New York or visited New York. So yes, I hope you learned something new. I think I called like 12. Did I call 12? I don't know. You be the judge. Did I miss something? Let me know down in the comment section. What are some interesting facts about New York that you would like people to know, or things that people should know, do or don't do when visiting or living in New York? Let me know in the comment section down below. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hasta luego.